Edeku, a peaceful farming village nestled near the Oganjaa forest in Benue State, lived a man named Kofi Ajuma. He was not a man of riches, but he possessed something far more precious, a happy, loving family. Kofi's skin was burnt from years under the sun, his back bent from toiling on other people's lands. Yet his spirit remained unbroken. He had no land of his own, but what he lacked in property, he made up for in dignity. His wife, Mama Efe, known in the market as Edeku, was the kind of woman who turned hardship into song. Every morning she woke before dawn, wrapping herself in a blue-patterned ankara, and with a smile, packed baskets of bitter leaf, garden eggs, and okra to sell at OT Market. She greeted customers with warmth and never returned home empty-handed, even if it meant taking credit from her fellow traders. Together they had 3 children, 2 strong sons, Ikenna and Dio, and 1 precious daughter, Efe, the apple of Kofi's eye. Efe had a laugh like tinkling bells and loved to tie her mother's headscarf around her small shoulders, pretending to be a queen. They were poor, but their home echoed with laughter and stories, especially in the evenings. Each night as the sun dipped behind the mango trees and the air cooled, Kofi would return from the fields with blistered hands and aching feet. But his face would light up the moment he heard his children shout, "Papa is back!" They would run into his arms, and Mama Efe would serve him warm yam porridge while recounting the day's events in the market. Their one-room mud house was small, but it held the kind of wealth money could never buy: love, unity, and peace. But not everyone valued these treasures. Kofi had many childhood friends in Edeku, boys he had climbed mango trees with, who now owned lands, trucks, and brick houses. Men like Okoro, Bala, and Sei. Over time, their laughter grew distant. They no longer stopped by his house or invited him to their wine-drinking gatherings. To them, Kofi was poor, irrelevant, and embarrassing. Kofi noticed their distance, but he told himself, "Their respect is not my bread. My family is my fortune." One afternoon, news spread of a village celebration, a masquerade festival to honor the planting season. Everyone was invited. Kofi, though hesitant, decided to attend. "Perhaps they'll remember we were once brothers," he thought, brushing off his only fine shirt and taking his eldest son, Ikenna, along. At the village square, drummers pounded rhythms, children danced, and men gathered around plates of jollof rice and suya. Kofi approached the group of his old friends. They smiled, surprisingly, and made space for him. "Kofi, long time," Okoro called, clapping him on the back. Relieved, Kofi joined them. For a while it felt like old times, laughter, teasing, shared stories of youthful adventures. But then the mood shifted. As they stood to leave, Okoro turned and said with a smirk, "Since you're not as rich as us, you should pack the plates, Abi." Kofi froze. He looked around. None of them defended him. "But we are all friends," he said softly. "I'm older than most of you. You can't mean this." "If you don't," Bela added cruelly, "we'll tell the sellers you haven't paid. Let's see how you handle that shame." Humiliated, Kofi bent and picked up the dirty plates. His hands trembled, not from fatigue, but from the pain of betrayal. And that night he walked home slowly. Ikenna, silent beside him, didn't ask any questions. At home, Mama Efe saw his face and asked, "What happened, Kofi?" Kofi smiled weakly and said, "Nothing that love cannot heal." And with that, he hugged his children, held his wife close, and swallowed his sorrow like warm fufu. But deep inside, a seed had been planted, a longing not just for respect, but for a chance to be more. A seed that would soon be watered by temptation. The days after the masquerade festival were unusually quiet around Kofi Ajuma. He went about his work with a tired dignity, avoiding the eyes of the villagers who had witnessed his humiliation. Whispers followed him like shadows in the fields. See how they made him pack plates like a servant. Children giggled behind his back. Even the market women who used to greet Mama Efe now did so with pity in their eyes. But Kofi kept his head high. He rose before the sun, gathered his worn hoe, and moved from farm to farm, offering his labor to anyone who would pay, even if it was just in yams or palm wine. His body ached, but he told himself, As long as Ife dances and Ikena and Dio eat, I have not failed. Still, the world grew harsher. There were times he would work from sunrise to sunset, and the landowners, men who once shared bowls of pepper soup with him, would say, "Kofi, come back next week. There's no money today." Some gave him spoiled gari or half a measure of beans as payment. He never argued. He simply thanked them and moved on. Then came the day he went to ask Okoro for help, not as a beggar, but as a man who needed to feed his children. "Okoro," Kofi began, "I've worked your farm for years. Could you lend me some naira? Efe has malaria and Ikena needs shoes for school." Okoro laughed. "You need money? Come clean my house, scrub my pit toilet, then we'll talk." Shame flushed through Kofi's veins, but he did it. He cleaned until his hands blistered, and at the end of the day, Okoro tossed him a crumpled N500 note. Mama Ife wept that night, not because of the money, but because her husband had been reduced to less than a man in the eyes of others. But Kofi wiped her tears and said, "Let them laugh. One day our story will make the gods weep." That one day seemed to arrive when Chief Obadiah Ofor summoned Kofi. Chief Obadiah was the wealthiest man in Edeku. His cocoa farms stretched from the market road to the foot of the hills. His compound had zinc roofs that glistened under the sun, and his gate was guarded by two young men with red caps and carved staffs. People said he had touched something deeper than soil. Kofi arrived at the compound humbly, bowing low. "Good afternoon, Chief. I came to ask if you need laborers for the harvest. My two sons are strong, and we will not disappoint you." Obadiah smiled and said, Yes, I need hands. Come tomorrow. Bring your sons." The next morning, Kofi, Ikena, and Dio were at the cocoa farm before the dew had lifted. They worked tirelessly, their shirts soaked in sweat, their hands raw from breaking pods and lifting sacks. For days they toiled. When the harvest was done, they stood before Chief Obadiah with hope in their hearts. "You have done well," the chief said, handing Kofi a worn envelope. "Here is 1/3 of your pay. Come back tomorrow for the rest." Kofi was puzzled. "But sir, we have always been paid in full." Obadiah's smile was wide. "Come tomorrow. We'll talk more." That night, Kofi brought the money home and gave some to Mama Ife. "Cook something rich. They've earned it." But sleep eluded him. His thoughts were a tangle of worry and suspicion. Something about Obadiah's tone, his eyes, the unfinished promise. Mama Ife noticed his silence and asked, "Kofi, what troubles your heart?" He looked at her and replied, "We have eaten from a pot whose lid is still shut." She didn't understand then, but her heart stirred with unease. And in the depth of night, as crickets chirped and the moon hung low over Edeku, the forest whispered. The next morning, Kofi woke early, his body still aching from the harvest. He washed his hands with cool water from the clay pot, tied his worn wrapper around his waist, and made his way toward Chief Obadiah Ofor's compound. The village air was thick with fog, as if the land itself held its breath. As he approached, the gates opened without a knock. The guards stepped aside without a word, as though they had been expecting him. Inside, a feast had been laid on a long table. Roasted yam, fried snails, pepper soup that smelled like fire and secrets. "Kofi," Obadiah called out warmly. "Sit, eat, you have worked well." Kofi hesitated but obeyed. He ate in silence, stealing glances at the chief, wondering what game this was. After the meal, Obadiah poured a cup of palm wine, handed it to Kofi, and leaned back. "You've broken your back for this village," he began. "But what has it given you? Mockery, hunger, dust. Your children deserve more." Kofi nodded slowly. "They do, but I only know one path. Work." Obadiah's eyes gleamed. "There is another path, less sweat, more reward. I can show you." Kofi furrowed his brow. "What are you saying, Chief?" Obadiah reached beneath his agbada and pulled out a thick bundle wrapped in goatskin. He placed it on the table and untied the cords. Inside were gold coins, fresh naira notes, and a pouch of old cowries. "This," he said, can be yours. 10 times what I owe you. All you must do is visit an old friend of mine. He lives at the edge of Oganja Forest. His name is Paolumo. Kofi leaned back. Forest? What for? No blood will be shed, Obidike promised. Just a small ritual. You rub some sacred oil, say the ancient words, then the spirits will bless you. This is how men rise, Kofi, not through hoes and broken backs, but through vision. Kofi stared at the bundle. Never had his eyes seen so much wealth. His throat tightened. He imagined new clothes for Ikenna and Dio, proper medicine for Efe, a tin roof over their heads, enough yam to fill 10 baskets. But spirits, Kofi whispered. Obidike nodded. Spirits of wealth. They require respect, not blood. You're getting older. One day your hands will fail you. Think of your children's future. He pushed the bundle forward. Take this. Call it a gift. Then decide. Kofi reached out, his hands trembling, and took the bundle. The weight of it was heavier than any sack of cocoa he had ever carried. When he returned home, Mama Ife's eyes widened. Kofi, where did you get all this? He lowered his voice and explained everything. The chief, the offer, the ritual, the forest. Edeku's hands went cold. Kofi, we've never walked that road. Our blessings have come through sweat, not spirits. This smells like danger. I know, Kofi replied, but what if this is the answer to our cries, to our fasting and prayers? Mama Ife sat on the floor, shaking her head slowly. Blessings that demand a forest path may one day demand a sacrifice. That night, Kofi couldn't sleep. He lay beside his wife, staring into the thatched ceiling, the goatskin bundle hidden beneath his pillow. He thought of Okoro's laughter, of Ikenna's cracked sandals, of Efe's cough that wouldn't go away. And then he thought of Paolumo, a name that felt like a breeze before a storm. By morning, his mind was made up. I will go to the forest, Kofi said. Mama Efe did not stop him, but as he tied his wrapper and slung his water gourd, she placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered, Go, but come back whole. Do not sell your soul for a clay palace. Kofi nodded. Then with the dawn mist curling at his feet, he stepped toward Oganja Forest, toward the ritual that would change everything. The forest loomed like a living thing. Tall Iroko trees stretched upward, their leaves whispering ancient things Kofi couldn't understand. The path to Paolumo's hut was narrow and coiled like a serpent, and every step felt like walking deeper into something unseen. His feet crunched over dry twigs. Birds didn't sing here. Even the wind moved differently, slower, heavier. At last he reached a clearing, a space where no grass grew and the air stood still. In the center sat a small hut made of palm fronds and red clay. Beside it, perched on a stool like a sentinel, was Paolumo. He was old, very old. His beard touched his chest. His eyes were not kind. They were knowing. You are Kofi Ajuma, the old man said without being told. Kofi nodded, uncertain if his voice could carry. Yes, Baba. You seek the favor of the gods who dwell beneath the soil, Paolumo continued. You desire wealth not earned by sweat, but summoned by sacrifice. Kofi swallowed hard. Chief Obidike said there would be no blood. No blood, Paolumo confirmed, but not no price. He stood slowly and motioned for Kofi to follow. They walked deeper into the forest until they reached another clearing. This one circled with stones. Strange symbols had been carved into the earth with chalk and ash. The air here was thick. Breathing felt like drinking smoke. Remove your clothes, the old man said. Kofi obeyed, stripping to his wrapper. Paolumo brought out a small calabash of dark, shimmering oil. Rub this on your body, he instructed, from your head to your feet. Do not skip a part. As Kofi rubbed the oil, it felt warm, then hot, then cold. His skin tingled. The old man began to chant in a language Kofi did not understand. The symbols on the ground seemed to pulse, and the trees leaned in as though listening. The old man pressed his hand on Kofi's head and said, The gods accept you. From this day forward, what your hands touch shall multiply. But remember, the gods may delay. but they never forget. One day they will ask for something in return. Kofi's heart skipped. What will they ask? Paolumo's lips curled into a smile that was neither kind nor cruel. They will ask when the time is right. Until then, enjoy. He handed Kofi a small leather pouch filled with gold cowries. This is the beginning, the rest will come. Kofi stood still for a long moment, clutching the pouch. He had come looking for hope. He was leaving with power, but not peace. Back in Edeku, Mama Ife stood by the fire when she heard the sound of feet approaching. She turned and saw Kofi, drenched in sweat, a strange light in his eyes. Kofi, she whispered. He said nothing at first. Then he held out the pouch. This is just the beginning. That night they feasted. The children danced. The pot overflowed. Neighbors peeked through the windows, whispering, Kofi has struck gold. But Mama Ife sat in silence, her eyes on the pouch, her spirit unsettled. She knew the forest had changed him, and the gods do not give without asking. The transformation of Kofi Ajuma was swift and dazzling. Within days of the ritual, money began to flow like river water. He was paid double for his labor, even when he barely lifted a tool. He bought a small plot of land near the village square and hired builders to erect a zinc-roofed home. His children now wore polished sandals, and Mama Ife no longer hawked vegetables. She managed a shop stocked with imported goods. Edeku buzzed with rumors. Did he find treasure under his yam mound? Maybe Obadiah finally gave him his due. No, it is the gods. He went to the forest, I heard. Kofi walked through the market with a new posture. His shoulders squared, his voice louder. He gave alms to the poor, paid for a new church drum, and donated to the community well project. People began to greet him with proverbs. A man who sleeps with the gods does not wake hungry. His former tormentors, Okoro, Bala, Sei, came crawling back. They visited with bottles of palm wine and empty flattery. Kofi, our brother, our friend, we were just giving you space before. Kofi smiled, but his eyes were cautious. He had not forgotten. Still, he allowed them in. Loneliness has many disguises. At home, Ife ran through the compound in bright wrappers, her giggle echoing like it had before malaria ever touched her. She was healthy now. Dio and Ikenna boasted new books for school. The house had curtains, a battery-powered radio, even a fan. But Mama Ife saw what others didn't. At night, Kofi would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, eyes distant. Now, sometimes he muttered words she didn't recognize. Other times, he would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, clutching his chest as if something heavy sat on it. Kofi, she asked one night, placing her hand gently on his, are you truly at peace? He turned to her slowly. Peace, he repeated. We have rice in the pot, shoes on our children's feet, and land we never dreamed of owning. Isn't that peace? Edeku didn't answer, but she knew. Wealth had filled their home, but it had not filled his spirit. And something darker had begun to happen. In the silence of the night, Kofi would sometimes hear a voice, a whisper, soft and rhythmic, like the chant of Paolumo. The gods may delay, but they never forget. He ignored it at first. But when his eldest son, Ikenna, fell from a mango tree and broke his leg, Kofi sat by his bedside, sweat gathering on his brow. It's just coincidence, he told himself. When the poultry he had bought for resale died overnight, 30 chickens without a mark on their bodies, Kofi's hands shook as he held one in disbelief. And then came the dreams. He was standing in the forest holding a flaming torch. In front of him, Efe stood silently, her ankara scarf fluttering in the wind. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move, and the gods, faceless, formless, whispered only one word. Soon. Kofi began to pray again. He gave more in alms. He visited the shrine of his ancestors, but the whispers grew louder, and the gold in his pouch began to feel less like blessing, more like bondage. Still, he said nothing to Edeku. Still, he smiled. Still, he kept building, even as the cracks formed under his feet. The sun had barely risen when a young boy arrived at Kofi's compound, breathless and dust-covered. "Baba Kofi, Paolumo, he says come, now." The message struck like lightning. Kofi's chest tightened. The old man had not summoned him since the day of the ritual. His hands trembled as he adjusted his wrapper. Mama Ife noticed. "Who sent that boy? Where are you going?" Just to settle a matter," Kofi replied, avoiding her gaze. But he knew. The time had come. The path to Oganja Forest felt narrower than before. The trees leaned closer, like judges at a trial. When he arrived at the hut, Paoluma was already waiting, seated like a statue carved from the roots of the earth. "You have enjoyed your portion," he said without rising. "The gods have been generous." Kofi nodded. "Yes, Baba, and I have given to the poor. I have prayed. I have honored the ancestors." Olumo's eyes glinted. "But that was not the bargain. The gods have waited. Now they ask." Kofi's voice cracked. "Ask what?" The old man stood, his back impossibly straight. "Your daughter, Efe. She is the one the gods have chosen." Kofi staggered back. "No, not Efe. Anything but her. You offered your body. The gods accepted. But now they want a mark of legacy, something you love, something that bleeds purity." Kofi's voice rose with panic. "She is a child, my only daughter, the light of my home." "She is your price," Paolumo said coldly. "You have 7 days." Kofi walked back to Edeku like a ghost. His legs moved, but his soul dragged behind. At home, Efe ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Papa, you're back." He knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. Too tightly. Mama Efe stood nearby, her face creased with concern. "Kofi," she said, "what is wrong with you?" But he couldn't speak. That night, he sat awake staring into the darkness. Sacrifice Ife? How could he? She was gentle, joyful, his prayer come to life. But then he thought of what Paolumo said. If you do not give her, the gods will take her, and everything else. And for the first time in his life, Kofi began to think the unthinkable. He avoided his wife. He could not sleep. On the third night, he stood over Ife while she slept, her chest rising and falling peacefully. She clutched her blue scarf even in sleep. He wept. He went outside and whispered to the stars, "Please, take me instead." But the stars said nothing. On the 5th day, he began to prepare. The same oil, a concoction brewed from forest herbs, a calabash bowl, and the mortar. He called Efe softly into the compound. "Drink this, my daughter, it's medicine, and rub this oil, it will keep you strong." Efe looked confused but obeyed. "Okay, Papa." The moment she swallowed it, her knees buckled. Kofi caught her and wept into her shoulder. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive me, my light." He wrapped her in a cloth and carried her into the forest under cover of dusk. Each step burned his feet. Each heartbeat screamed at him to stop. But fear had choked his soul. He reached the clearing. The same circle of stones. The same silence. He laid her gently on the earth. Her eyes were closed. She looked like she was dreaming. He raised the pestle with shaking hands. "Efe, I'm sorry." But just as he was about to strike, a scream shattered the forest. "Kofi, no!" It was Edeku. She had followed him. Behind her were villagers with torches, eyes wide in horror. Mama Ife ran to her daughter's side, gathering her in her arms, her voice a thunder of grief and rage. The villagers surrounded Kofi, pulling him away before the pestle could fall. Kofi collapsed, weeping uncontrollably. "I didn't want to. They said she would die anyway. They promised." But the gods were silent, and the villagers had heard enough. By sunrise, all of Edeku had heard what happened in the forest. The once honored Kofi Ajuma, now shackled with ropes, sat in front of his compound with head bowed. Villagers stood in clusters, some in shock, some in rage. They stared at him like a stranger. Their former brother, now a man who had nearly spilled the blood of his own child. Inside, Mama Efe cradled Efe, who had not yet awakened. Her blue scarf, now soaked in sweat and forest dust, lay at the foot of the mat. Mama Nuri, the village herbalist, pounded roots with fierce urgency. She was drugged but not broken, the old woman murmured. Her spirit is strong. She will rise again. But no one could say the same for Kofi. By mid-morning, the drums were beaten across the village square. Oba Iweka had summoned a public court at Ulo Ogwa, the ancestral platform of justice. The people gathered, men, women, even children. They wanted to hear with their own ears what could push a father to such horror. Kofi was dragged before the king. His eyes were swollen, his lips cracked, but he did not resist. Oba Iweka looked at him long and hard. Kofi Ajuma of Edeku, do you understand why you stand before us today? Kofi knelt slowly. I do, my king. I am guilty. The crowd gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others wept. Speak, the Oba commanded. Speak all that led you to this madness. And so, with tears streaming down his face, Kofi told everything. About Chief Obidike, about the oil, the ritual, the gold, the whispers in the night, the voice of Paalumo, and the price the gods demanded. He told them of the fear, of the greed, of the unbearable weight of poverty, of being mocked, ignored, left behind. I wanted my family to live better, he sobbed, but I became something unrecognizable to myself. When he finished, silence fell over the square. Even the wind dared not move. Oba Iweka closed his eyes, then spoke. Your actions are a betrayal not just to your daughter, but to our ancestors, our laws, and our spirit. But, he paused, you did not strike her, and it was your wife who saved the child. There is still a small flame left in your broken house. The king looked to the guards. Find Chief Obadike Ofor. Let him face the village. Let him answer. But when the guards searched the estate, Obadike was gone, vanished, his compound emptied overnight, his lands abandoned, his name already turning to ash on people's tongues. Cowards, the people whispered. A snake leaves when the hut catches fire. Oba Iweka turned back to Kofi. You will not die, but you will not walk free. You will spend the rest of your days working in the king's farm, where you will serve the village that you nearly dishonored. Your family may visit, but you will live apart from them until your spirit is clean. Kofi bowed deeply, tears soaking the red dust. Thank you, my king. Thank you. As he was led away, villagers parted silently, some in pity, some in disgust. Mama Ife stood at the edge of the square, her arms wrapped around a now conscious Ife who stared blankly ahead. Her innocence had been touched, but not taken. And as Kofi passed them, he dropped to his knees once more. I'm sorry, he said. I lost myself trying to protect you. Mama Ife's lips trembled. She didn't speak, but she didn't turn away. That night, Edeku was quiet. Fires flickered, parents held their children tighter, and in every home someone whispered, may we never pay for gold with the blood of those we love. The king's farm was far from the village center, beyond the stream where children once played, past the termite hills and cassava plots. It was quiet there, lonely. The only sound was the swing of hoes and the rustle of dry leaves. This was where Kofi Ajuma now lived. He worked from sunrise to dusk, his back bent like a question, his voice reduced to whispers. He was no longer rich Kofi or poor Kofi. He was simply a man paying a debt not in coins, but in tears and sweat. Each evening when the sun began to fall, he would kneel beside a small heap of stones and pray. May Efe grow in peace. May my sons find strength. May Edeku know I never stopped loving her. Back in Edeku, Mama Ife was rebuilding too. She no longer wore her finest ankara or ran the shop. She returned to the market stall where she had started, selling bitter leaf and okra. People greeted her with mixed eyes, pity, respect, shame. But she held her head high. A woman who stood in the way of death deserves no shame, the old women would say quietly. Efe healed slowly. She no longer ran or danced, but she smiled again. She hummed the songs Mama Efe used to sing while pounding yam. Her blue scarf never left her side. Every week, Edeku would take the children to the edge of the king's farm. The guards allowed Kofi to come forward and sit with them beneath the mango tree. They never stayed long. But every visit ended the same. Efe would whisper, "Papa, I missed you," and Kofi would weep softly into her shoulder. Chief Obidike was never found. Some say he fled to the city. Others believe the gods claimed him, dragging him into the earth. His compound remained abandoned, vines swallowing its gates, the cocoa trees growing wild and bitter. His name became a warning told to children, "Don't take Obidike's path lest you walk alone." Years passed. Ikenna became a teacher, Dio a farmer, and Efe, against all odds, grew into a young woman with the wisdom of sorrow and the heart of forgiveness. She would often sit beneath the same mango tree where they used to meet their father, reading books aloud to the village children. Kofi never left the king's farm. He refused the king's offer of early release. "Let me finish what I started," he said. "Let my sweat water the land where I broke trust." He aged quickly. His beard grayed, his bones thinned, but he found peace in silence, purpose in penance. On the day he took his last breath, the wind blew gently through the fields, and a parrot from the forest flew overhead, circling once before vanishing into the sky. They buried Kofi beneath the mango tree. Mama Efe placed a bowl of fresh yam and palm oil beside his grave. Efe laid her blue scarf on the mound. The villagers stood around the grave in silence. Obayaweka himself stepped forward and spoke. He walked into the forest a desperate man. He came back a broken one, but he died with his soul healed. Let his story be told, so that we remember. True wealth is not in gold, but in love, courage, and the power to say no. That night, the drums of Edeku were silent, but in every home stories were told, and children listened. Because Kofi's story was no longer a warning. It had become a legacy.